Hi class, it's Professor Anderson, and this is our first Zoom meeting of the quarter. These are not mandatory, they are optional. I know you all have busy schedules. I don't expect you to always be able to meet with me at the times that I set up. Um, I will record this so you can always watch it at a later date. And most of the stuff that I'm going to talk about, you really could find somewhere else in the course. It's just stuff that I want to highlight and let you know is important. And also give you some time to ask me some questions if you have any. Let's go ahead and start. I have a list of things I wanted to talk about. Okay, I have just some overall feedback from the first papers, or not the first papers, the response papers, to help you move forward with your research papers. The research paper is a little bit different than a response paper. The papers that you've been writing so far have been, of course, your own personal response. So you're going to say, I this, I that. This is how I personally interacted with the essay. And the research paper, you're not going to do that. It's going to be a lot more formal. You're going to be using outside sources, secondary sources for the first time, and that's a little bit different. And so if you have any questions as you go through that, just go ahead and email me. You guys worked on your thesis statements last week. I did provide feedback for all of that in the forum grading feedback. Go ahead and look at that if you haven't yet. Even if you got a good grade, I could have just some helpful information about your topic. So check it, even if you got a perfect score. And the thesis statements, basically, the number one thing with your thesis statement is you want to make sure that it is arguable. You don't want it to be some obvious thing. You don't even want it to be provable, really, beyond the shadow of a doubt. You want it to be something that people can discuss. You want it to be something that you can try to prove to someone. So your thesis statement cannot be something like William Faulkner was a Southern Gothic writer. That's not a thesis statement because everybody knows that's true. That's something you can prove with his background. It's not arguable. So you would want it to be something that you can have sort of a back and forth. You want there to be an opposing viewpoint. You want someone to be able to say, I don't think that's true. I think this story is about this, or I think he put that in there because of this. So you definitely want to make sure that it's arguable. That's the number one thing. You also want to make sure you have enough to write about with your thesis statement that it can meet the word requirement for the paper. If it can't, I recommend adding in another story that you can connect with it. That's an easy way to kind of give you more to write about. And then there's the opposite end where sometimes I feel like people try to do too much in the research paper. They say that they're going to write about, 4 stories or something like that. You don't want to do that. That's going to give you way too broad of a topic. You're going to want to narrow it down. I think 2 stories is usually the sweet spot. Maybe you can add a third if you can connect it well. But you don't want to do too much. And then sometimes only having 1 story, you don't have enough. So if you are a little bit confused about where you're going with that or how much you should be writing about, go ahead and email me about that too. Let's see here. Just kind of some little stuff that I'm still seeing in papers. And this is on the essay checklist that I post in the forums every week that you have a paper. You don't want to be using contractions. So you should be writing out do not. This is just kind of a formal thing for academic writing. In first and second person pronouns, this is something you definitely want to be conscious of in the research paper. You don't want to be using first and second person pronouns. So that's I, we, me, you, yourself, us. You don't want to use any of those. You want to say the reader or just kind of a general person. You don't want to say you do this when reading the story because that person might not do that. You don't want to say I believe that the author does this because technically you don't need that I believe there. You can just say the author does this. I know you believe that because you're writing it. So you don't need any of those words in. So yeah, no first and second person pronouns. What else? Don't reference the essay specifically. You don't want to say in the introduction, in this paper, I'm going to write about this topic, or in this paper, I'm going to use the biographical literary theory. You don't want to mention the essay at all. You don't need to be stating those things. You don't need to state what you're going to write your paper about, because I'm going to read your paper and I'm going to see that that's what you're writing about. So you don't, it's kind of a formality thing. It kind of makes you sound like a salesman of your paper. So just don't reference the essay specifically. What else? Oh, asking questions instead of statements. I would say very rarely is it okay to include a question in any kind of academic writing. And that's because you want to be answering questions, not asking them. So you don't want to put hypothetical questions. They're just not strong. It's not as strong as if you were, using a statement. For example, if you put, why did Louise seem happy about her husband's death if he doesn't seem like a bad guy? I want to know the answer to that question. So instead of asking the question, go ahead and write statements about why you think that is. Okay, let's see. Works cited entries, index citations. We've been doing MLA format this whole quarter. You guys should probably be getting used to it by now. Go ahead and review that again before you do your research paper. I'm still seeing some mistakes on in-text citations, so go ahead and review those. It's always, for MLA anyway, the author's last name and the page number. And if there is no page number, you can just leave it out. You don't have to include paragraph numbers or anything like that. And if the author's last name, for some reason, if that is not there, you can just use the title of the article. The works cited is always on its own page with the works cited in the center at the top, and your works cited entries will be in alphabetical order. That's something people always forget. Let's see, what else are we looking at? Oh, present tense. You always want to write in present tense. So that is, instead of saying Hemingway wrote in his story, you would say Hemingway writes in his story. You kind of want to write about it in real time because you're talking about it in real time for your research paper. Let's see. Oh, the difference between quoting and paraphrasing. This is something we also have been working on all quarter. I just want to go over it really quick. Quoting means you are using exact wording from your source. So that is word for word, exactly like you read it. And that will be in quotation marks, and it will have an in-text citation at the end of it. And the quotation marks signify that the exact wording is coming from your source. So when you do a paraphrase, that is your own words. It's the idea of a source, but it's your own words talking about it. So you won't use the quotation marks because it is technically in your own words, but you do have that in-text citation at the end to show that you are getting the information from a source, even if you aren't getting the exact words themselves. Okay, make sure you include those citations, because if you don't have citations, if you don't have a works cited page, if you do have a works cited page, but the sources in the works cited page aren't quoted throughout the paper, that technically is plagiarism, whether it's intentional or not. So make sure you are being very careful about including the right citations in your research paper. I've had a lot of students ask, what is an okay similarity rating and turn it in. And I do not give a specific percentage because even if there's only a 5% similarity rating, that 5% could be plagiarized. And even if there is a 30% similarity rating, all of that could be cited properly, and that could not be plagiarism. So it's not about the similarity percentage. It's just about whether or not you're citing everything that comes up in that similarity properly. Let's see. Oh, it is generally accepted around 20% of your paper should be quotes either from primary sources or secondary sources. So the percentage that you do kind of want to look out for is that you do not want a high similarity rating, even if you're citing it correctly, because you don't want it to, you don't want the majority of it to not be your own words. So you want the most of the paper to be your own writing. And then the 20% can be quotes, evidence from the story, evidence from secondary sources to kind of support your argument. And also summary versus analysis. You want to always have analysis in your research papers. You don't want to summarize the story. And in academic writing, you can always just kind of accept that whoever is reading your research paper has already read the story too. So I've already read Young Goodman Brown, so you do not need to summarize the entire story before you really get into what you're analyzing. That's just kind of taking up space in your paper that you could be using to kind of prove your point more. So do not summarize. You always want to focus on analysis. Okay, so the research paper, you definitely want to be using one of the literary theories. I sent out an extra resource about literary theories this week through news announcements. So go ahead and look at that. And if you are still struggling with them, reach out to me. I will say it can get kind of in depth with the literary theories. The ones that I recommend using that I think are not only sort of the easiest, but kind of give you the most to write on would be biographical, psychoanalytical, Marxist, feminist or gender, or formalism. Whenever people are asking which theories they should focus on, I always think those are definitely the best. You always have a lot to write about with those, with the stories we've read in class. I do want to stop right now and see if anybody has any questions. Okay, no questions. Let's see, is there anything else I wanted to go over? I don't think so. I think that is all I wanted you to keep in mind for your research paper. The assignment this week, it is an annotated bibliography. It is not an essay. I know I've said that over and over again in news and announcements this week, but without fail, someone always turns in an essay instead of annotated bibliography. And I know that this is probably the first annotated bibliography that you all are doing, and it can be a little confusing at first. So go ahead and look at the resources that I posted in news and announcements. And if you still are kind of struggling on what this is supposed to be, reach out to me. I know I've said reach out to me like 500 times in this video, but I beg you, reach out to me if you need help. Don't just sit there confused. For the annotated bibliography, the most important thing to keep in mind is that it's going to look a lot like the works cited pages that you guys have been doing this quarter. It's going to be set up very similar. You'll have a list of citations. And then of course, the main difference is that after the citation, you will have the annotation. Make sure that you have two parts. In the first one, the first part, you want to kind of summarize your sources. And then in the second one, you evaluate not only the source, but also the author. Is the author credible? What do you know about the author's background that makes them an expert on the subject? So the first part will be the summary, and the second part will be an evaluation of the article and the person who wrote the article. I guess that is it. If I didn't cover something, I'll go ahead and message it out through news and announcements. Thank you for joining the first live session or watching the recording. Yeah, I hope you guys are doing great. I hope the semester is going well for everyone. Like I said, I'm always here. Little questions, big questions. You have my email address. Just go ahead and let me know what you guys need. All right, have a good night. Bye, everyone.